Well, there's crossovers between the different activities, and we're in the same territory in terms of the kind of subject matter, but the events are distinct and different from each other. The festival is long-standing, we're in our 20th year. The Biennales have 3 editions so far. Takes a bit slower because they're every 2 years rather than every year. But the Biennale came out of the festival in that in early years countries would try to participate in the festival but got a bit lost. It's a big event, it's a big city, and the different country activities just didn't have a kind of focus. And then the opportunity came to take over Somerset House, which is an important building in central London, and we grasped that and made the leap to start our first Biennale, and it's very much focused around countries and participation. So it's modelled on the Venice Biennale, and I think interestingly, as far as I know, it's the only design Biennale of its type in the world. Well, I think, as I said, they're different events from each other. And it's worth noting that the Biennale is at a single venue, it's a paid attraction, it has an artistic director, it has a theme, and as I said, it's solely about countries. By contrast, the festival is an altogether different beast. It's citywide, it's an open platform, it has no theme, it is almost entirely free entry, and I think a critical difference is, we're an umbrella over this activity on the platform we provide, that probably 85-90% of the festival activities are offering things for sale. Yeah. So what we're trying to do is to bring our audience to that content. And indeed, sometimes we describe ourselves as a kind of lonely hearts organisation because, and certainly in the lockdown, the content providers, which is the design community in London, suffered greatly. There's only so far you can go online. Yeah. And nothing, in my view, nothing beats a kind of real experience. And people were very, very hungry for the opportunity to engage with audiences again. And, we bring new audiences to that content. Each year we have about 300 active partners doing a variety of activities across the city. And the last measured year, although we will do it again this year, in 2019 we had 1.1 million visits, which is a lot of individual visits over a 9-day period. And what that says to me is how hungry the audience is for new design stories, seeing new products, new ideas and new activities. And I think that's really the kind of crux of what the festival is. So I think just in terms of their operational model, they're very, very different from each other, in the festival. An ongoing relationship with the Mayor's office, and I've been very involved in the creation and the concept of the creative industries, where we take us back to the 1990s. And when Tony Blair's government came in 97, they commissioned a mapping exercise, a survey, which was based on work that myself and a small group of people had done before. And it was very, very important to establish this sector in government terms, because it wasn't previously recognised, and it had grown organically over quite a long period of time. And within that sector, design is a very important constituent part. But we're now at a point where it's 1 in 6 of every job in the city, it's a major employer, it's a major earner for the city, and it's growing at 3 times the speed of the economy overall. But to sustain that position, and I think it's safe to say we've got the largest creative economy out of any global city, but it's a competitive world. And one illustration is that when we started the Design Festival, there were 4 or 5 global cities doing design promotion activity. We're now at 170. Wow. I think that's probably low as well. I need to get someone to count them up again. And it's a very user-friendly way for a city with ambition, wanting to say something positive about itself, to start some kind of design promotional activity. Now, I think I can safely say we're at the top somewhere. If ourselves and Milan feel like we're in a different place than many of the other cities, but things change, and we've chosen to leave the European Union. The impact of that is access to talent is going to be harder. We benefited hugely from a migration of talent over the last. We've been operating for 20 years. I think we can describe that as a golden era for design in London, but it's been fueled by migration. And people are coming to be educated, or people are coming for employment because it's easy to do so. It's now harder. So how do we sustain that? And one of the strategies of the Mayor's Office is about showcasing and how important it is to tell stories about one's prowess and the breadth of talent and opportunity that still exists in London. So I think we're a kind of critical part of that strategy going forward. And it's a kind of soft power opportunity for not just for the city, but for national governments as well. But our primary relationship is with the Mayor's Office. And we've worked closely with them for many years on this issue. But I think we're heading into a challenging period because of the bigger kind of global politics and the in my view, relative isolation the UK has chosen to put itself in. I would like to see a creative visa for the UK. Chance of the government adopting that is low, I'd say. But how do we find ways to sustain that movement of talent? And there's a direct correlation between the availability of the best talent and reputation. And if we all accept that we need to maintain, if not enhance, that reputation, we need to find ways to bring those global design talent here still. I had an unusual subject there in those days, which was history of design. Which was a joint course for the Victorian Albert Museum. And everyone thought we were weird because, we didn't make anything. We just wrote about stuff. But I had a show, just like everyone else did, but my show was my thesis, which was probably less interesting to look at than all the wonderful work that everyone else had done. But it was great to have been educated in an art design school environment. So I have that kind of creative sensibility, in my system because of it. Well, let's actually start where it's going, if you don't mind doing it that way around, because I think that, and you've hit on a couple of very important subjects. Let's start with technology. So I think the technology sector is moving into a new phase. And it's interesting that Meta, they've changed their name. I mean, a quite a rather bold statement about the metaverse. I think understanding of that is low at the moment. And I think that you need the lens of design to help translate and interpret this quite big step forward in technology. It's interesting also that IBM have developed a quantum computer whose computing is beyond our kind of, it's astonishing. But if you try and visualize it, it's either very boring or very difficult to kind of understand. And I think it's interesting that companies like IBM and with their quantum computer, which will become much more kind of known in the next year or so, are employing design businesses to help them translate and open up an understanding about it. So there's I think a fertile relationship going forward between technology and design. They kind of need each other, and I think always felt that designers, not only are they problem solvers themselves to bigger and bigger issues, but they are the kind of user-friendly skin on other disciplines and activities. Another big one, very obvious though, is sustainability. And the design community has become not just motivated but by issues around sustainability, but they're now subscribing to kind of core principles. So, for example, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. Ellen MacArthur was the youngest, I think, ever around the world yachtswoman, and she has set up a foundation which is all about the circular economy and this idea of regenerative businesses. And our mission in life is not just to reach out to the wider business sector, but actually to convert the global design community as well. So they subscribe to these principles, knowing they're at the coalface, translating the products and the ideas and the investment into the consumers' laps. Yep. So they play a pivotal role, and I think they are rising to the occasion now. So I think we're going to see a lot more of that as we go forward. The other big area I think is well-being. You know, this has become very apparent to us in a period of lockdown, and you know, the shock to the system of national and international lockdown, where we weren't able to operate in the same way, and indeed the kind of the rise in issues around mental health and isolation, you know, and so on, and I think provoked quite a major rethink about that and what role, again, design can play to solve some of those bigger current global issues. I think it's also questions about how we live in our cities. And what we saw was a rise of localism. I don't know what it's like for you, but I walked everywhere. That's my daily exercise, which meant I stayed in my neighbourhood. True. And my sense of ownership and investment in my own neighbourhood grew. I met neighbours I had never spoken to before. You know, it was actually a positive impact on communities. Yet my local high street is a disaster. You know, meanwhile, retail has collapsed effectively. Local authorities are lagging behind in terms of their planning policies, for particularly for ground floor retail. Still insisting on new developments of ground floor retail, which is why? No one's ever going to be able to use them. And I think it's again a tremendous opportunity for the architecture and design community to come up with some innovative ideas about how we reboot our communities through the spaces that are available to them, be it smaller outdoor spaces, which the city's full of. And we tend to concentrate on the bigger ones, but actually it's the micro spaces which offer greatest opportunity. And you know, the seismic shift, one in retail and two in office. You know, I spoke to someone recently here who says AAA office is fine, the rest of it is screwed. And that means a significant rethink about how we operate in our city and indeed movement through our city. Moving on, you know, electrification, which is of cars, is not just a seismic event for the automobile industry, biggest thing to happen to them in 100 years, arguably, and causes them all sorts of existentialist crises. But you know, they're moving through it. But what I'm interested in is the impact on the city.
Exactly.
And you know, cities are effectively designed about moving around in your private car. And I think those days are beyond us. And if you talk to the more innovative car companies, they feel very responsible for their role in our urban futures. You know, we're looking at a shared model rather than private ownership. The focus on electrification tends to be around pollution, which of course is a benefit, cleaner air. But the other big issue is noise. You know, the predominant noise in the city is the combustion engine. So you can imagine a near future where our cities are very, very different places, and you need integrated transport planning to go alongside that, and you need a proper subsidised public transport system, people walking, people using bicycles, you know, and so on. But I think it's an opportunity for the architecture and design community to step up and at this moment come up with some really innovative ideas. And I'm afraid they're not doing that enough. What motivates me to carry on is we've never run out of ideas. There's always something else we want to do, we want to say, we want to try and talk to people about. And we do a festival each year, we're in the middle of it now, it's super stressful, we get to the end, dust start daft down, and off we go again.
Yep.
So it's a circularity to my life. And it won't take long before I get a call from someone and say, I've got this idea. I say, what's that? So you tell me about this. I think, wow, that's great, let's do it. And what I've been able to bring to this is that kind of energy and drive to pull all those ingredients together to make something. And when you get this kind of gelling of the core components, bingo, you've got a project, off we go. And that will continue. And that will continue for me for some years to come. How long? Do I do another 20 years? Don't know. But I'm certainly motivated to keep going in the short run. I talked a little bit about where the festival might go already in terms of its themes and approaches and partnerships. But I think that they have a momentum of their own after a while. And a lot of the great events have outlived their founders. And keep going. Now, sometimes I feel like I'm a bit of a, captain of a super tanker. You know how long it takes to turn a super tanker around. They go in one direction and kind of off they go. So I think that's quite a useful kind of analogy. The other thing I think is we try to deal with the geography of the city, and London is a big and sometimes daunting place for not just for visitors, but its residents as well. And there's parts of the city I don't go to very often, and the old idea it was a city made up of villages, which of course it had consumed all these villages as it grew and grew. But we want to help our audiences find and see as much as possible. So we've now got 12 design districts. They're spread across the city. They're clusters of activity. You can walk from project to project when you're in that particular neighbourhood, and they're different from each other. What you see in Shoreditch is different from what you see in Brompton to what you see in Park Royal. There needs to be faith that the creative process can continue, and that we can play a role in planting a flag in that neighbourhood and saying, come and see this stuff. Because it's really, really interesting.
Okay.
And it might be quite experimental, and it might be quite challenging sometimes, but it is about creative drive and energy. And we as an event need that, we as a city need that, and we as audiences need that. And that dynamic, I think, is there, and we've managed to find that sweet spot many times, and I think my mission is to be able to carry on doing that.